Hey guys, how's it going? This is Natinator, and welcome to the second installment of the Creepypasta titled Faith's Game. Wasting no time, let's get right into it. So, as always, turn out the lights, get comfortable, and let the story continue. The second day. It was a rock and a hard place. That night, Dr. Waters directed me to stay on campus in dorms normally reserved for medical students in training. It wasn't very inviting, I must say. The dorms were poorly kept, and cobwebs dominated the corners of every room. I swore I caught a whiff of mold or mildew. Considering my other options, however, staying on campus was the only one that didn't reek of failure, or rather, burn a hole in my wallet. The night was rough, nonetheless, as I lay with my gaze piercing the singular shadow. I could not shake from the back of my mind the creature that bed not a mile from me. The creature that I would have to face again come dawn. The blood-red sun had barely begun to peek over the horizon by the time I met Dr. Waters once more by the same building. I wasn't fond of mornings, but then again, you can't wake up early if you never slept. I shut my driver's side door before I turned to get my equipment from the back. Waters held up a finger, halting me. "Not today," she bluntly stated. "She must get to know you first." "Not today?" I repeated in disbelief. "How long do you think this is going to take? I only need an hour's worth of film." "6," she said. 6 days, no more, no less. You must prove to us, to her, that you are who you say you are." This woman was crazy. What do I have to prove? They're the ones who need to prove something to me. And there was no way that I was going to stay here for another 5 days. I turned around, ready to hop in my rusted Nissan for the long journey back home. No documentary was worth this. "Remember, Miss Jacobson," Dr. Waters yelled after me. I wasn't sure why her words had froze me the way it did. It was though I was silently desperate for there to be a reason to stay. A reason. That would make the difference in everything I stood for. "If you run now, the world will never truly know what lay beyond these doors. You're the final hope for this girl." "Or else what?" I glanced over my shoulder. She needn't answer me. I could tell by the mere dullness of her soulless eyes what fate await that young, innocent girl. Were these people really willing to stoop that low? Was the girl really that dangerous? And how was I being here going to change that? I had too many questions to ask at once. I did my usual thing, kept my mouth shut and my eyes and ears open, as she once more took me past that forbidden sign that read, "Violent Patience," into the jaws of the beast. What have I to lose at this point? She was lucky that I had a week to spare during spring break. I followed closely behind, head down, as I began to stride lightly. Pleasant wooden doors were slowly replaced by iron behemoths that could take a nuclear strike. Whatever the stoic guardians kept at bay did nothing to shield the sound that came from within. Quite often we passed patients in the middle of their tantrums or inconsistent muttering. Some doors were solid, others held heavy viewing glass or barred windows. It was almost like a prison in my eyes, and every step felt more and more like the corridors of Mount Massive Asylum. I took my eyes off my surroundings for 1 second to see the lonely door at the end of the hall, the one that held my destination. My heart leapt into my throat. My collar had been grabbed onto and wrenched to the side. My head met cold, hard metal, the metallic noise echoing through my skull. Untrimmed nails raked into my neck, the woman's warm breath seeping into my mouth and nose like smog. By the time my vision leveled, Dr. Waters had taken a hold of my shoulders, dragging me back in the opposite direction. It all happened so fast. I stumbled before regaining balance and looking my assailant dead in the eye. I didn't even have a moment's notice to scream. "Don't go!" the patient shrieked, clawing the metal through the iron bars. Dr. Waters helped me to my feet. Giving me a moment to compose myself, she began to walk me to the door, though my ears staggered behind. "The cursed child lives! She lives beyond that door! The cursed child! That cursed child!" Her voice gradually muted as we passed through the door, leading into a small transition room with yet another door. Dr. Waters fussed over me, checking my head for any signs of injury. "I'm terribly sorry about that. She's one of our advanced cases of schizophrenia. Patients like her are the reason we don't often allow guests back here." She gestured to the door. "Come through here. This is the transition into the nursery." Nursery? I never thought of an asylum housing a nursery before. It was like any other, only with a little more padding. Nurses were constantly on watch in every corner of the room. Every toy, plaything, or activity was completely impact-resistant, with little to no blunt edges whatsoever. Even the wallpaper was designed with air pockets, like entire sheets of bubble wrap that were plastered to the walls. It was pretty spacious, and gave the children plenty of stimulus. The children themselves were all around the age of 10, though didn't seem to have the mental capacity of a child over 8. Even with a scant amount of observation, I could tell that they were getting the best care possible here. "Why is this room in the violent woman's wing?" I asked as the thought struck me. "I see both boys and girls here." Dr. Waters strode past me, gesturing for me to follow. "We believe that the presence of children are more soothing for the women here. Sometimes, if they show good enough behavior, they can visit this room under heavy supervision. They are much safer here than in the men's wing. Usually maternal instincts kick in, and the children are quite safe." She took me to the far corner of the room. It wasn't until now that I spotted it. No, her. Huddled by some blankets with her eyes locked on her Nintendo DS. She was pale, like her skin never knew sunlight, and frail, like she never knew a good meal. A couple other children were sat immediately behind her, their focus only broken by our arrival. They stood, their intense eyes boring into my flesh, before trotting past to look for something else to do. The girl, almost instantly noticing the absence of her audience, took a glance around, before looking up at her new visitors. Her eyes were bloodshot, but sparkled like none others in this god-forsaken place. "Faith," Dr. Waters addressed her, "this is Miss Jacobson." Faith's eyes never left me. It was as though she was sizing me up, or completely awestruck by what I was. I couldn't think of anything else to do but smile, maybe throw in a little finger wave. But when she finally broke the searing visual contact, her gaze had swept immediately back to her handheld. Her fingers didn't resume their usual pattern over the buttons as I anticipated. Instead, her fragile palms lifted in my direction, presenting me with her greatest treasure. "Play the game?" she asked in a sweet, delicate voice. I halted. Images from the other day swamped my mind. Was this really the same girl? Without so much as hesitation, I put my hand up, grinning nervously. Not today, dearie." She didn't budge. In fact, she pressed the DS toward me more firmly. But before I had a chance to say anything more, Dr. Waters intercepted. "Miss Jacobson is going to be your new friend and play with you for the next few days." "I am?" I frowned, only to pick the act back up when I saw the heartbreak in Faith's face. I didn't sign up for this. "I mean, yes, I am." Faith shut her DS and put it to the side. Somehow this made me more comfortable. She spoke in a voice that sounded much older than it should. "So, you're here to replace Miss Annabelle?" No, Dr. Waters cut in again. "Not replace. No one can replace Miss Annabelle. She's just going to keep you company. Now, we'll be right back." She took me back into the transition room, careful not to let any children slip through the cracks. I took a fleeting look back over my shoulder, half expecting Faith to scoop her device back up and resume whatever she was doing. But she didn't. Her eyes never left me, and even as I saw her smile for the first time, I was not reassured. I could already tell this girl was going to test me in every way she knew I feared. It was not a sinister look. It was merely the look every student gave their substitute teacher. After the door was shut, I let the doctor see clearly my irritation. "I came to make a documentary, not babysit." I can't remember exactly how this conversation went, let alone everything else, but this interpretation comes close. "This is our deal, Jacobson. Take it or leave it." Waters grew firm. "She is our youngest schizophrenic case we have ever received. You're lucky to have even gotten a glance at her, let alone the interaction I'm giving you. Look at it this way. You document her, you try to understand her, and while you do that, I believe you can help her." "How? What can I do?" "That's for you to figure out. We've done all we can, Jacobson. She's become a danger to herself. If Faith doesn't make a breakthrough soon, her suffering may cause her to do something beyond harmful, maybe even fatal. Isn't it your job to make sure that doesn't happen?" Waters shook her head, prepared to put this dispute to rest. "This is different, Miss Jacobson. You might not understand now, but this child is beyond our control. You either take this chance, or walk away now. Any questions?" Too many, I thought. None of this made the least bit of sense. How did simply getting a few more minutes of footage plunge me into this? Every argument I had against this woman was null and void with my sense of humanity. I was too kind. I wanted to help Faith more than anything. How was I going to do that? I really had no idea myself. If the professional couldn't help her, how could a film student? I wasn't even really sure what my goal was. How was I to know if I had helped her or not? Why was I asking myself all these hypothetical questions never to be answered? I don't know. It was all bullshit. "Well?" Waters growled. "Questions?" I scoffed in frustration, grabbing a random thought from the back of my head. Her DS. What is that for? She's the only child who has one, it looks like. That game thingy? The doctor was somewhat confused at first. I'm not really sure what it is or what she does on it. A nurse brought it in from the Lost and Found. One of the students left it behind. So why does Faith have it now? Well, before, Faith was a very cold and spastic child. We figured all she needed was interaction with other children, but they were afraid to approach her, and she wanted nothing to do with them. When the nurse let her see the game, she calmed down, focused on it. She was made approachable by the others, so we figured, what the heck, let her keep it. Since then, her outbursts have slimmed from constant to once every few days. Waters turned with a flip of her brunette hair. Now, if you don't mind, I have more important things to attend to. You're just gonna leave me here? Of course. I was called to a conference in Washington last night. You'll be fine. There are many trained nurses around to lend a hand if need be. I wish you luck on your documentary, Miss Jacobson, she said, opening the door. Before slipping out, she turned back one final time. You may or may not like what you find. And that's it. Thus would end as much as I can recall to that point in time. It's somewhat scant, but so are the memories. It doesn't help that every word I type builds on my rapid heartbeat. Thankfully, I don't need to remember every detail. I thought ahead. After the second day drew to a close, I scrambled to grab whatever spare paper I brought along. I may not be a reporter, but I knew how to organize my thoughts like one. I found a small, clean notebook hidden among my knapsacks, and jotted down as much as I could on that every night. A log. I guess at the time I figured I'd use it as a narrative for the documentary never to be. Now it's just a hellish chronicle of the real horrors that lie beyond their doors. And I'm about to share every word of it. April 14th, 2014. Today was the first day spent with Faith. Shortly after being left to my own devices by Dr. Denise Waters, I joined her in the nursery. The first few moments were spent sitting there beside her, silently, observing her play on Nintendo DS. I recognized it almost immediately, as I am a proficient gamer. Oh, it was one of the first games I ever played on DS myself. It was Kirby Superstar Ultra, and I must say she was pretty far into it for someone her age. She was already tackling the consecutive boss battles in the stage known as the Arena. That particular stage took me forever to complete myself. After watching her get taken down by the boss, Wham Bam Rock, she finally turned her attention to me and said, blunt as a stone, "I don't like you." I asked why. "You're here to replace Miss Annabelle. I liked Miss Annabelle." I had heard this name a few times now. My curiosity spiked. Who is Miss Annabelle? What happened to her? Faith closed her DS and looked away somewhat wistfully. He got hungry the other night. She fed him. I wasn't exactly sure what she meant by that. I'm guessing that when Miss Annabelle took her leave, she mentioned to Faith that a pet of hers at home needed feeding. I settled on that theory, considering the fact that I couldn't get anything more from her. Faith is a classic schizophrenic case. Luckily, I've brought my laptop to conduct research when I can. Unable to sleep last night, I searched up schizophrenia on Google to give myself a quick rundown. Like what I saw, Faith wasn't exactly the most focused individual I've spent time with. Sometimes it was thought she wasn't even speaking to me. She was somewhat spastic, and constantly changing the subject to something random, most of the time having to do with that game. I was at least glad I knew what she was talking about. I'm sure anyone else in this hospital who managed to speak with her couldn't hold a conversation about King Dedede's hierarchy, or the fundamental basis of the heavy lobster. She's a smart kid, given her mental state. She began to take more of a liking to me after these conversations on her game started. At first, she was fixated on one thing and one thing only, getting me to play it. I held my ground and refused every time. I wasn't very familiar with schizophrenic cases, and I was afraid of the consequences for touching her DS too long. Perhaps she may forget she lent it to me, and attack me to get it back. She certainly wasn't too fond of the nurses taking it away from her the other day. Whatever the case, as so many scenarios ran through my head, I wasn't about to take a chance with this child I barely knew. She was persistent, but once she knew I had some kind of knowledge of the game itself, her pleads all but melted away. Even though she was through most of the game, she often asked me for tips on how to get further. Her whole world transfixed on this game. It seemed to be the only thing giving her life meaning, connecting her to those around her. The other children were fascinated by this little device that made her a local celebrity. I see why it's so dear to her. Once we got comfortable with one another, we began to do more together. A simple game of catch with a plush ball proved entertaining to her. Somewhat surprising, considering the kind of stimulation she gets from her game. I suppose it wasn't the game itself she craved. It was companionship. Maybe this is what Dr. Waters meant when she said I could help her. To be a filmmaker means to keep an open mind. It meant persistence and hard work, with little bias behind it. She might have made the right choice calling to me. The rest of the day was spent doing random activities about the nursery, and soon she even forgot to mention the game at all. I took it very slow, to the very end. By dusk, Faith was even sad to see me go. I didn't find out much about her, but at least she's more comfortable with me now. She's not who I thought she was. Unlike the other patients, she's smart, she's level-headed. She appears more and more human every second I spend with her. She knows what's going on. She's not mad like they say. She's a child, like many I've seen before. Something seems out of place here, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it.